She lost her baby, then she lost herself, and now she was about to lose her husband. This is the story that will stay with you forever. Her name was Zara, and before her body became a battlefield, she was the most alive person in any room she walked into. Certain of herself, in a way that most people spend their whole lives chasing. When Zara walked into a room, something shifted. Min Jun noticed it the first time he ever saw her, and he never stopped noticing it. He married that woman and thought, nothing is ever going to touch us. He was wrong. But before the story makes sense, you need to know how it started. Zara was pregnant, and then she wasn't, and nobody could tell them why. That was the beginning of the end of the life they thought they were building. The night her body gave out, Min Jun was in a boardroom. See, biggest deal of his life. And he left. He left everything on that table and he ran. Because some things you can never buy back. It started so small that neither of them saw it coming. She was tired. Not normal tired. Something deeper that sleep could not fix. Her body started changing in ways neither of them could explain. Weight that appeared without reason. Skin darkening along her neck and arms. Hair she kept finding on her pillow every morning. She went to the doctor. He told her she was stressed. She went back. He told her she was stressed again. Third visit. He gave her a pamphlet. A pamphlet. For a woman who had just described 6 months of her body falling apart. A pamphlet. She came home that night and said, Min Jun, I feel like I am going crazy. And he didn't have the right words. Because what do you say to a woman who knows her own body, who is watching it betray her every single day, and who keeps being told it is all in her head? What made it worse was the world outside their door. Comments under her photos. She's let herself go. What happened to her? She would put her phone down and say nothing, and Min Jun would watch the light behind her eyes dim just slightly, every single time. He told her once to stop reading them. She looked at him and said, it is easier for you to say ignore it than it is for me to actually ignore it, because they are saying out loud what I am already saying to myself. That sentence never left him. He found them a better doctor, one of the best endocrinologists in New York. She asked the right questions, ordered the right tests, told them to go home and wait for her call. And then, she did something unexpected. She called Min Jun first, not Zara, Min Jun, privately. Before she called his wife with the results, she asked to speak to him alone and told him something that stopped him completely still. And in that moment, standing alone with that information, he made a decision he carried by himself from that day forward, a decision that Zara did not fully know about. Not yet. 2 days after that private call, Zara called him. He was in a meeting. He walked out without a word to anyone in that room. She was on the other end, and he could tell immediately from her breathing that something had shifted. She said, the doctor called. She wants us to come in, today. She said she found something. He told her he was on his way. She said, Min Jun. She didn't sound like it was nothing. Standing in that corridor, he already knew what they were walking into, but he was not going to tell her that. Not yet. What the doctor found had been living inside Zara's body for years. Quietly, stealing from her. Her energy, her confidence, her cycle, her sense of self. The doctor said 2 words. Polycystic ovary syndrome. Zara had spent a year being told she was imagining it, and in that one sentence, she wasn't crazy anymore. She didn't cry in the office. She held it together through the entire appointment, through the explanation, through the questions, through the paperwork. She made it all the way to the car. Before we continue, if you have heard about this condition, hit the subscribe button, and if this is your first time hearing this, hit the like button because I want to see how much awareness this has. And then she broke, not loudly. Zara never cried loudly. She turned toward the window, and her shoulders came up, and the smallest sound escaped her. The kind a person makes when they have been strong for too long, and their body finally says enough. Min Jun didn't say anything. He just reached over and held her hand. She gripped it like she was holding on for her life. And maybe she was. Maybe that is exactly what she was doing. When she finally turned to look at him, her eyes were red and her face was trying to be brave and failing. And he thought, "This is the most beautiful she has ever looked to me." He said, "I am not going anywhere, not for 1 second of this. You hear me?" She nodded, couldn't speak yet. "Whatever this journey looks like, I am in it, all of it, with you." She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, and they drove home like that, her hand in his. Everything else could wait. They got home, and the exhaustion was sitting on her, the emotional kind that weighs more than physical tired. He told her to go shower, that he would fix dinner, that she didn't need to think about anything. She gave him a small, tired smile and turned toward the bedroom. She had barely taken 3 steps when his phone rang. The screen was face up on the counter. She saw the name before he did. Iyama. Mother. He looked at Zara. She looked at him. He picked it up. "I'll just be a minute." And he walked away. That was his mistake, not the call. The walking away. She had just sat in a doctor's office and heard that her body may never give her the child she dreamed of. And the first thing he did when they got home was walk away from her. For his mother, the same woman who had never once welcomed Zara into this family. What his mother said on that call, that was a conversation for another day. But what Zara felt standing alone in that living room, she felt like she was losing him, not to another woman, to a world that had never fully accepted her. And that is the loneliest feeling there is. He should have told her what his mother said on that call. He knows that now. But that morning she looked so fragile, so tired from carrying everything, and he told himself he was protecting her. He was wrong. She asked him over breakfast, quietly, carefully, the way Zara asked things when she already half knew the answer, but was hoping to be surprised. "What did your mother want last night?" He looked at her, and he made a decision he would regret before the day was over. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'll handle it." She looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she nodded and said nothing. He left for work and she tried to have a good day. That is the part that hurts the most looking back. She tried. After everything, the diagnosis, the fertility question, the exhaustion of the last year, she decided that morning to do something small for herself. She went to the salon, got her hair done, did a little shopping, small things. But for a woman who had spent months feeling invisible inside her own body, small things matter. She sent him a photo from the salon. Smiling, the real kind. He saved that photo. She came home feeling slightly lighter than she had in weeks, and stopped dead at the door. His mother was sitting in her living room, uninvited, unannounced, sitting in Zara's home like she owned the floor beneath her. The first thing his mother said wasn't a greeting. It was, "You look bigger than the last time I saw you." It went downhill from there. She sat in that chair and said things that should never have been said. That Zara's body was a sign of weakness. See that a woman who could not control her own health could not be trusted to build a family. That Min Jun deserved a woman who was whole. That this condition, this PCOS, was proof that God was sending a message. She called it a curse. She sat in Zara's home and called her body a curse. Zara didn't shout, didn't break down. She walked into the bedroom, closed the door behind her, and called her husband. He was 7 minutes away from the most important investor meeting of his career. A meeting 18 months in the making. His phone rang and he saw her name. He picked up immediately. Her voice was steady and quiet, and that somehow made it worse. She said, "Your mother is here." 3 seconds of silence. "I'm coming home." His assistant called after him. His driver was confused. The investor's team sent 3 messages in 4 minutes. He didn't respond to a single one. He walked through the front door, and his mother looked at him like she had been expecting a welcome. He looked at her and said, "Whatever you came here to say to my wife, you will not say it in this house again. Not today, not ever." She started to speak. "Iyama." One word. The way he said it told her everything. She left. He found Zara sitting on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, still holding herself together by a thread. He sat beside her, said nothing immediately, just sat. Then she looked at him and said, "She called it a curse, Minjun," and something in his chest collapsed quietly. "She is wrong," he said. "About all of it, about you, about us, about everything. But what if she's right about the children?" "She is not right." "You don't know that." "I know you," he said. "And I know that whatever comes next, we face it, together. Her opinion is not part of this conversation." She cried that night, not because of the diagnosis, not because of the fertility question, but because someone had looked at her body, her already bruised, already exhausted, already fighting body, and called it a curse. And because, for just one moment, she had believed it. He held her until she stopped. And he made himself a promise that night that no one, not his mother, not the world, not anyone, would ever make his wife feel that way again. Not while he was breathing. But his mother leaving that house didn't mean she was done. It just meant she had decided to be quieter about it. And quiet is always more dangerous. Weeks had passed since the visit. The house was quieter, but not the bad kind of quiet, the kind that comes after a storm, when everything is still standing, just rearranged. Zara was different in those weeks, not healed, not whole yet, but different. She had stopped shrinking. Minjun would watch her in the mornings, taking her medications, researching her condition, writing things down in that little notebook she carried everywhere, learning her own body like it was a language she was determined to become fluent in. He didn't interrupt those moments. He just watched. And he was quietly, deeply grateful. Then one night, he woke up at 2 a.m. and her side of the bed was empty. He found her in the living room, phone in hand, tears on her face. She had found a community online, Black women with PCOS, women who had felt everything she had felt, been dismissed the same way, shamed the same way. She looked up at him and said, "I thought I was the only one." She started posting her own story. No filters, no carefully chosen words, just the truth. Thousands of women flooded in saying, "This is me." She told him one evening, "Minjun, there are so many of us, and nobody is talking about it." He looked at her and thought, there she is, his wife, coming back to herself. He had missed her, even though she had been right beside him the whole time. He had missed her. But while she was healing, he was the one falling apart. Nobody saw it. That was the point. He smiled when she needed him to smile. He held her when she needed to be held. He said, "It will happen," every time the conversation turned to children. But alone, he was terrified. Every month that passed without a pregnancy was a month he performed certainty he didn't feel. She was fighting so hard, doing everything right, and her body was still making her wait, and he was running out of ways to hide how much that was breaking him. He wanted to be a father. He had never said it out loud, not like that, not with that kind of rawness, because she was already carrying enough. But the truth was sitting inside him every single day, getting heavier. What if it never happened? What if they had come through all of this? The diagnosis, his mother, the fight, the healing, and her body still couldn't give them what they both desperately wanted. He sat with that question alone every night, and every morning he woke up and put it away, and went back to being her strength. He had been sitting alone for 2 hours when his phone rang. "Zara." He picked up. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, "Minjun, something happened." He has never moved so fast in his entire life. He has replayed that moment 1,000 times. Zara standing in their kitchen, holding that strip, hands shaking, tears already falling before she even said a word. And him, a man who has closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, completely undone by 2 pink lines. He crossed that kitchen in 3 steps and held her. They didn't say anything for a long time. They just stood there, the two of them, holding each other in the kind of silence that only exists between 2 people who have been through war together. He thought about every doctor who had dismissed her. Every morning, she had woken up exhausted and pretended she was fine. Every comment under her photos. Every night she had cried quietly so he wouldn't hear. Every month they had waited and hoped and tried not to hope too loudly, because hope had started to feel like a risk they couldn't afford. And now this. 2 pink lines. The next morning, they called the families. Her mother screamed so loud Zara had to hold the phone away from her ear, and they both laughed at the sound of it. Pure joy coming through a phone speaker at 7 in the morning. Her sister called back 3 times. The messages flooded in, warm and fast and full of love. And then they called his mother. He made that call himself. He wanted to be the one holding the conversation. She picked up on the second ring. He told her Zara was pregnant. Silence. Not the surprised kind. Not the overwhelmed with joy kind. The calculating kind. Then she said, "So she can become pregnant after all." Not congratulations. Not, "I'm so happy for you both." Not, "I cannot wait to meet my grandchild." So she can become pregnant after all. 7 words. Said in a tone that managed to turn good news into a verdict. Zara was standing right beside him. She heard every single word. He watched her face in that moment. She didn't flinch, didn't react. Just stood there and absorbed it the way she had learned to absorb everything that came from that woman. Quietly, without letting it show. But he saw it. The way her smile didn't quite come back after that. The way she busied herself suddenly, moving things that didn't need to be moved, wiping a counter that was already clean. He ended the call. He put his phone down and pulled her close. She let him hold her. But he could feel it. Something had been taken from that morning, and they both knew who had taken it. He went to work that afternoon. He could not concentrate on a single thing. He kept looking at his phone, looking at the photo Zara had sent him of the pregnancy strip sitting on their bathroom counter. He must have looked at it 15 times before noon. His PA, Ji-yeon, knocked and came in with documents he had asked for. He looked up from his desk and said, "Ji-yeon, we are pregnant." She stopped. Then her face broke into the widest smile. And before either of them registered what was happening, she had crossed the room and hugged him. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Quick. Warm. Completely innocent. She stepped back immediately, slightly embarrassed. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that." "Don't apologize," he said. "Thank you." She smiled again and left the room, and he went back to work. His phone buzzed at 6 p.m. It was Zara. No text, just a picture. He looked at it for 3 seconds, closed his laptop, picked up his jacket, and told his entire team good night in the same breath. His driver said he had never seen him move that fast. He had worked for him for 6 years. He had seen a lot, but he had never seen that. He pushed the bedroom door open and stopped. The lights were low, candles on the dresser, and Zara was standing there in a silk burgundy lingerie, set he had never seen before. Hair down, shoulders back, chin up, looking like the woman he married, looking like herself. He stood in that doorway for a moment, just looking at her. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to just stand there?" That night was the first night in a very long time that they were not a couple managing a diagnosis or navigating family pressure or carrying the weight of everything they had been through. They were just 2 people, completely in love, celebrating the life they had fought so hard to build. And for one night, everything was perfect. Neither of them knew what was coming. If they had known, he would have held her longer. He would have stayed in that moment forever. But they didn't know, and morning came, the way it always does, without asking permission. 4:27 a.m. He felt it before he saw it. Something wrong in the way she was breathing. He turned on the light, and his whole world stopped. She was bleeding. He said her name once. She opened her eyes and looked at him, and he could see she already knew, that she had probably been lying there for a while already, alone in the dark, knowing. He didn't waste a second. He carried her to the car. drove faster than he had ever driven in his life, spoke to her the entire way, telling her to stay with him, telling her she was going to be fine, telling her things he was not sure he believed but needed her to hear. The hospital waiting room at 4 a.m. has a specific kind of silence. They sat in it together, her head on his shoulder, his jaw tight, praying in a way he had not prayed since he was a child, bargaining with whatever was listening. The doctor came out. He knew from her face before she opened her mouth. She said the words carefully, professionally, the way doctors are trained to deliver news that has no gentle version. The pregnancy was gone. Zara sat very still while the doctor spoke, nodded at the right moments, asked one or two quiet questions, thanked her. And then, when the doctor left the room, she turned toward the wall, and he watched his wife's shoulders come up. And he heard that sound again, the one from the car after the diagnosis, the one a person makes when they have been strong for too long. Only this time it was different. This time it wasn't relief underneath it. This time it was just loss, pure and complete and devastating. He put his arms around her from behind and held her as tight as he dared. And he said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Some things don't have words. They came home as the sun was coming up. She walked straight to the guest room. He stood in the hallway and watched her close the door, and he told himself she just needed a moment. But the moment became a day, and the day became 3 days, and 3 days became a week. She barely came out, barely ate, barely spoke. He would leave food outside the door and come back to find it untouched. He would knock gently, and she would say she was fine in a voice that was the opposite of fine. One evening, he sat on the floor outside that door and just stayed there for a while. She knew he was there. He knew she knew. Neither of them said anything. After 10 days, she opened the door. She looked at him with eyes that had aged somehow, like grief had added years to them overnight. She said, "Mean June, I need some time. I need you to give me some time." He said, "Whatever you need." She said, "I just need to feel this. I can't perform okay right now. I can't be what you need me to be." "I'm not asking you to be anything." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed the door again, and he stood in that hallway alone, with no idea what to do with any of it. So he went back to work, because work was the only place where he knew who he was anymore. Ji-yeon noticed immediately that something was wrong. She didn't ask. She just adjusted, quietly made things easier where she could, kept unnecessary people away from his office, made sure he ate something during the day when he forgot. One afternoon, she brought coffee in and set it down, and was about to leave when he said, "We lost the baby." She stopped, turned around slowly, sat down across from him, and just listened. He didn't plan to say more than that, but something about the way she sat there, open, present, no agenda, made words come out of him that had been locked up for weeks. He told her about the miscarriage, about Zara in the guest room, about knocking on that door every day, about the food left untouched, about sleeping alone in a bed that felt enormous, about being the strong one for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to just fall apart for a minute. Ji-yeon didn't say much. She didn't try to fix it or offer solutions. She just listened. And it is impossible to explain what that did to a man who had been carrying everything alone for months. It became a pattern, not planned, not deliberate. Just, he would have a hard day, and she would be there. He would say more than he intended, and she would receive it without judgment. He told himself it was just talking, and it was. Until one evening, it wasn't. Late. Everyone had gone home. The office was quiet in the way it only gets after 9 p.m. He had just finished telling her about the night Zara closed the guest room door for the first time. How he had stood in that hallway. How he had not cried. Not once through any of it. But that night, he had come close. Ji-yeon was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up from her chair and walked around the desk. He didn't stop her. She stood close. Too close. the kind of close that has a name. He could hear his own heartbeat. She looked up at him and said, "You don't have to carry all of this alone." Her hand came up slowly toward his face, and he closed his eyes. 1 second, 2 seconds, and in that darkness behind his eyes, he saw Zara. Not the Zara in the guest room, not the Zara who was broken and withdrawn and grieving. The Zara in the kitchen, holding that pregnancy strip, laughing and crying at the same time, saying, "Are we really doing this?" He opened his eyes, took one step back, picked up his jacket, and walked out without a single word. He sat in his car for 40 minutes before he could drive, hands on the steering wheel, engine off, staring at nothing, thinking about how close he had just come, and thinking about what kind of man stands at the edge of something like that while his wife is at home grieving their child. He had no answer for that. He just drove home. He didn't go to the bedroom. He walked straight to the guest room door, and he sat down on the floor outside it. And for the first time since the hospital, since the diagnosis, since all of it, he stopped being strong. He let it out, quietly, but not quietly enough. He didn't know how long he sat there, but at some point, the door handle turned. She was standing there, looking down at him, her husband, sitting on the floor outside her room like a man who had run out of everywhere else to go. She didn't say anything immediately. She just looked at him for a moment. Then she slid down the wall and sat beside him on the floor. They sat there together in the dark hallway. Not talking, not touching, just existing in the same space for the first time in weeks without a door between them. After a while, she leaned her head on his shoulder, and he closed his eyes and breathed for what felt like the first time in a very long time. They talked that night, not about everything, not about the big things, just talked, the way they used to before all of this. Quietly, without agenda, without either of them trying to fix the other. She told him she was sorry for disappearing. He told her she had nothing to apologize for. She said, "I felt like I had failed us." He said, "You didn't fail us. We are still here." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, we are still here." And slowly, the way things that are real and solid eventually find their way back to standing, they found each other again. Not all at once, not dramatically, just day by day, meal by meal, morning by morning. She moved back into their room. She started sleeping again. Really sleeping. The kind that actually rests a person. He started coming home earlier. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. Because home felt like home again. They were careful with each other, the way you are careful with something precious that has been through a lot. But they were together. And together was everything. About 3 weeks after that night on the floor, Zara called him at the office with something in her voice he hadn't heard in a long time. Excitement. She said, "My mom is coming." Mama Fatu arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. She had taken 2 connecting flights, traveled for almost 18 hours, with 2 heavy bags and bad knees. And she walked through that door like it was nothing. Because for a mother, there is no distance too far. She hugged Zara for a long time without saying anything. Then she pulled back, held her daughter's face in both hands, looked at her the way only a mother looks at her child, seeing everything, missing nothing, and said something to her in Wolof that Minjun didn't understand. Whatever it was, Zara closed her eyes and nodded, and something in her shoulders released. Mama Fatu had come prepared. She had packed things from home that you cannot find in any pharmacy in New York. Moringa leaves, baobab powder, fenugreek seeds, dried hibiscus, local herbs that Gambian women had been using for generations, long before any clinic gave them a name. She didn't present them like medicine. She didn't sit Zara down for a lecture. She just started cooking, took over the kitchen with the quiet authority that is simply the natural state of African mothers everywhere. She made banachan the first night, rich and slow and filling in a way that felt like it was feeding something deeper than hunger. She made supakanja, She made a kara in the mornings. She brewed teas from the herbs she had brought and set them in front of Zara without ceremony. Just drink this. And Zara drank. While she cooked, she talked. Not clinically, not like a doctor, just woman to woman, mother to daughter. She talked about eating in a way that worked with Zara's body instead of against it. Saying about the importance of consistent meals and what certain foods did to hormones and blood sugar. About how the women in their family had always known that the body speaks and that the job of the people around you is to listen. She said, PCOS is not a punishment. It is your body asking for a different kind of attention. Give it what it needs, and it will give you back what you want. Simple, but true in the way that things passed down through generations of women are true. Zara listened to every word. She started eating better, not dieting. Eating real food, consistent food, the kind that came from Mama Fatu's hands and tasted like home. Minjun watched the color come back to his wife's face that week. He watched her laugh again, genuinely, fully, for the first time since the miscarriage. And he thought, this woman flew all the way from Gambia with a bag full of herbs and a heart full of love, and did more for his wife in 1 week than 6 months of anything else had managed. He was grateful in a way he didn't have the words for. It was a Thursday evening. Mama Fatu was in the kitchen. Zara was sitting at the counter, watching her cook and talking and laughing at something her mother had just said. Minjun was in the bedroom when his phone rang. Sol, his head of operations. His voice told him immediately that this was not a routine call. There was a situation with one of their biggest partners. A deal they had been building for 18 months was at risk of collapsing. He needed to be there in person. The next morning, no later, he walked into the kitchen and looked at Zara. She read his face immediately. What happened? Sol, I have to go tomorrow morning. She looked at him for a moment. Then she glanced at her mother. Go, she said. We are fine here. He packed that night while she sat with her mum. He could hear them talking and laughing quietly from the bedroom, and something about that sound made leaving feel slightly less heavy. He was in the shower when his phone lit up on the bed. He didn't see it. Zara walked past the bedroom door and saw the laptop open on the bed. The flight confirmation email was on the screen. She stopped. She looked at it. 2 passengers. Minjun Kwan. Ji-yeon Park. She stood there for a moment that can only be imagined, because he was not in that room. Then she closed the laptop, walked back to the kitchen, sat down beside her mother, and said nothing. She never brought it up. She just went quiet in a way that was different from before. Not the broken quiet of the guest room. Something sharper than that. Something focused. He kissed her goodbye the next morning. She smiled, but her eyes didn't, and he carried that image all the way to Seoul, and couldn't explain why it unsettled him the whole flight. He has made a lot of decisions in his life. Business decisions, financial decisions, decisions that moved markets and changed the direction of companies. But the most important decision he ever made was not made in a boardroom. It was made in a hotel room in Seoul, at 11 p.m., with everything on the line. And he almost made the wrong one. The business trip was supposed to be straightforward. 3 days, a collapsing deal. Fix it and come home. He had done it 100 times before, but he had never done it with Ji-yeon beside him, carrying something that had been building since the night in his office, since the hand on his, since he walked out and drove home and sat outside Zara's door and told himself it was nothing. It was not nothing. And Seoul, his mother's city, his childhood city, the city that represented everything his life was supposed to look like before Zara, made everything feel more complicated than it needed to be. The meetings were intense, long days, high pressure. Ji-yeon was sharp and efficient and professional in every boardroom they walked into. But outside those boardrooms, she was something else entirely. Looking back, the signs were there from the first day. The way she adjusted his tie before a meeting without being asked. The intimate restaurant she booked for just the two of them. the handwritten note she passed him during a boardroom session that had nothing to do with business, the way she appeared at his hotel gym at 6 a.m. and called it coincidence, the hand across the table that stayed 3 seconds too long, each thing on its own, nothing. All of it together, something he should have addressed much sooner than he did. But he told himself it was nothing, because telling himself it was nothing was easier than dealing with what it actually was. The deal closed on the third day. Everything they had come to Seoul for, done, signed, finished. He told Ji-yeon good work. She smiled, and something in that smile told him the night was not over for her yet. He was in his hotel suite 2 hours later, jacket off, tie loose, thinking about Zara, about calling her, about the image he had been carrying since the airport, her smile that didn't reach her eyes, the way she said travel safe like she was saying something else entirely. A knock at the door. He opened it. Ji-yeon, dressed differently from the boardroom, hair down, a bottle of champagne in her hand. She smiled and said, "We closed the deal. We should celebrate." He should have said goodnight right there. He didn't. He stepped back and let her in. She opened the champagne, poured 2 glasses, handed him one. Then she started talking. About him. About how she had watched him for months. About how she had never met a man who carried as much as he carried and still showed up every single day. About how whoever had his heart was lucky. He put his glass down. Ji-yeon! She put her glass down too, moved toward him, her hand pressed flat against his chest. Then slowly, she reached for the strap of her dress and let it fall. She looked up at him and said, "Just tonight. Nobody has to know." He stood completely still. And then something happened inside him that can only be described as clarity. He thought about Zara. Just Zara. And everything else became very simple. He took Ji-yeon's hand from his chest, held it for 1 second, and removed it. He stepped back, looked at her directly, and said, "You need to leave." She blinked. "Min-jun?" "Tonight," he said. "Not just this room. Book the first flight back to New York. Your position is no longer available." The color drained from her face. "You're firing me." "I am ending a situation that should never have been allowed to develop," he said. "That is on me as much as it is on you. But it ends tonight." She picked up her things, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back at him. But he had already turned away. He heard the door close behind her. He sat on the edge of that bed for a long time, thinking about the man he almost became in that room, thinking about everything Zara had been through, everything they had been through, every hard chapter of the story they were still in the middle of writing. He picked up his phone. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was soft, a little sleepy, real. He said, "I'm coming home, baby." A pause. Then, "I'll be here." He had a lot of time to think on that plane. On 11 hours. Just him and the darkness outside that window, and everything he had been carrying for the past 2 years, sitting in his chest, like something that needed to be put down. And somewhere over the Pacific, he made himself some promises. He promised himself that whatever her body needed, whatever this journey still required, he was going to treat it like a road they were walking. Together, at the same pace. He promised himself that no business deal, no family pressure, no version of the life anyone else had planned for him, was ever going to be worth more than the woman waiting for him at home. He thought about everything she had been through, the dismissals, the pamphlets, the weight that wasn't her fault, the hair on her pillow every morning, the comments online that said she had let herself go when her body was fighting a war nobody could see. He thought about her on that floor beside him in the dark hallway, leaning her head on his shoulder after weeks of silence and just breathing. And he thought, this woman is the most extraordinary person he had ever known, not because she never broke, but because every single time she did, she put herself back together, and she deserved a husband who matched that. From that moment forward, he was going to be that husband. He got home and she was in the kitchen. She turned when she heard the door, and she looked at him the way she had been looking at him since the beginning, like she could see all the way through him. He crossed the room and held her, and he said, "I'm sorry. Not for one specific thing, for all of it." She held him back, and she said, "I know, 2 words, that was enough." 5 months later, Zara was pregnant, and this time, something felt different. Not just medically, not just in the numbers the doctor showed them at every appointment. Something deeper than that. Something in the way Zara moved through those months. Carefully, but not fearfully. Hopeful, but not recklessly. Like a woman who had learned the difference between holding on too tight and letting go too soon. She managed her PCOS with everything she had learned. The medications, the food that Mama Fatu had taught her, the consistency, the rest, the community of women who had walked this road before her and left lights on for the ones coming behind. No, she was not the same woman who had stood in front of that bathroom mirror 2 years ago, not recognizing herself. She knew exactly who she was now, and her body, her fighting, surviving, extraordinary body, was finally giving her what she had always wanted. The baby shower was Mama Fatu's idea. She flew in from Gambia 3 weeks before the due date. Same 2 connecting flights, same heavy bags, same bad knees, same energy that made every room feel safer the moment she walked into it. She took over the kitchen without being asked. She cooked for 2 days straight. The apartment filled with the smell of banachan and baobab, and something sweet that nobody could identify, that she refused to tell anyone the name of. Friends came. Zara's sister flew in from London. Colleagues weren't people who had followed Zara's journey online and had somehow become real in her life. Women who had found her story and seen themselves in it and never stopped showing up. The room was full of love in a way it had never been full of anything before. His mother arrived at 4 p.m. She walked through the door and looked around. At the decorations, at the food, at the women laughing and celebrating. And then she saw Zara. Zara, round and glowing and more alive than anyone had seen her in years, standing in the middle of the room laughing with someone she had met online who had driven 4 hours to be there. His mother stood and watched her for a long moment. And then Mama Fatu appeared beside her. The 2 women stood next to each other. No introduction needed. They both knew exactly who the other was. Mama Fatu looked at her quietly, then said, "She is everything." Just that. 3 words. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded and said, "Yes." No grand apology, no dramatic confrontation, just 2 mothers. Finally agreeing on the one thing that had always mattered most. The baby came on a Thursday morning, 6 hours of labor, Minjun beside her the entire time, holding her hand, telling her she was the strongest person he had ever known, meaning every word. And then, he was here, their son, small and perfect and furious about being in the world in the way that newborns are furious, like they have opinions already and they need everyone to know it. The nurse placed him in Minjun's arms, and he stood there, a Korean billionaire who had built companies from nothing, Siu who had sat across tables from the most powerful people in the world without flinching, completely undone by something that weighed less than 4 kilograms. He looked at Zara. She was exhausted and tearful, and the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life. She said, "Well?" He said, "He looks like you." She laughed. The real kind. The whole body kind. The kind he fell in love with before he fell in love with anything else about her. To every woman watching, who has felt her body betray her, who has been handed a pamphlet when she deserved an answer, who has been called lazy, dramatic, too much. You are not broken. You are not a curse. You are not alone. Keep going. Your miracle is still coming.